Good morning. My name is the Reverend Eileen Wiviott. I am the acting senior minister here at the Unitarian Church of Evanston, and I'm grateful to be joining you today from our sanctuary to celebrate Ann's life. We begin this service by lighting the chalice flame, symbol of Unitarian Universalism, Ann's chosen faith community. We light this chalice in honor of Ann and in the spirit of love and service to which she dedicated her life. We welcome friends and family of Ann Kathleen Peterson. We join in this virtual gathering to celebrate her life and to mourn her death. We come together to honor not just the gift of Ann's life, but the spirit of all life and the source of love to which each of us belongs. May the stories shared here by some of those who were close to Ann bring us comfort. May the tears we shed and the laughter raised from fond memories be both solace and celebration. May we find greater understanding through the words, music, and images that evoke her essence. In this way, we preserve Ann's legacy of devoted friendship, kindness, and generous service. Spirit of life, in this hour, remind us of the beauty and sacredness of living. Let us be assured that our lives have value and meaning beyond our presence here, and that love and goodness endure beyond death. I want to thank Ginny Neiman and Brenda Russell, who not only were a great help to me in putting this service together, but who, along with many others, too many to name, cared so beautifully for Ann in her final months and days. I also share greetings and appreciation from the Combs family, who became Ann's family through her late husband, Ridge. They were all very dear to Ann, and they are grateful that all who are joining today to say goodbye and celebrate her will carry her memory forward. Her death leaves a profound sadness in their hearts. They hold the beautiful memories of celebrations, laughs, and joyful times together. They are deeply grateful for having Ann in their lives and for this community, which has been such a big part of hers. As many of you know, Ann's stepson, Bill Combs, died on June 27th after a long battle with cancer. His tragic loss is grief, compounding grief, especially for his wife, Atoji, and their two children, Mia and Darcy. They loved Ann very much, and Ann loved and adored them. During one of her last visits with Ann, Atoji told her that she was a second mother to her, and that meant so much to Ann. We hold the entire Combs family at this time of devastating grief with tenderness and prayer that their broken hearts may heal. Lois Combs, Ann's friend, shares a Mary Oliver poem in tribute, followed by Cheryl Keene, Ann's stepdaughter, reading a poem by A.A. Milne.
Hello, I'm Lois Combs. Ann's friendship was an unexpected gift in my life. I miss her terribly. She was a big fan of Mary Oliver's poems, and I'd like to read one right now from the book The Swan. It's called Don't Hesitate. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give into it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not often wise and not often very kind, and much can be never redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps it's this way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb.
I'd like to share a poem called Spring Morning by A.A. Milne. Where am I going? I don't quite know. I'd like to share a poem called Spring Morning by A.A. Milne. Where am I going? I don't quite know. Down to the stream where the king cups grow, up on the hill where the pine trees blow. Anywhere, anywhere, I don't know. Where am I going? The clouds sail by, little ones, big ones, over the sky. Where am I going? The shadows pass, little ones, baby ones, over the grass. If you were a cloud and sailed up there, you'd sail on water as blue as air. And you'd see me here in the fields and say, doesn't the sky look green today? Where am I going? The high rooks call. It's awful fun to be born at all. Where am I going? The ringdoves coo. We do have beautiful things to do. If you were a bird and lived on high, you'd lean on the wind when the wind came by. You'd say to the wind when it took you away, that's where I wanted to go today. Where am I going? I don't quite know. What does it matter where people go? Down to the wood where the bluebells grow? Anywhere, anywhere, I don't know.
Ann was born at Kewanee Public Hospital, the only child of Harvey and Catherine Peterson. She was raised on a farm in Galva, Illinois, and lived her whole life in this state, which is not to say she didn't have an adventurous spirit. She truly did. As a high school teacher early in her working life, she traveled every summer and especially enjoyed visiting Europe and Japan. Ann was also an avid reader and devoted book club member. She was smart and studious, but also fun-loving and friendly. She was a master gardener at the Chicago Botanic Gardens, and she enjoyed the symphony with friends. She loved to cook and share in holiday meals with family. She was a supportive and loving friend, wife, cousin, stepmom, and grandma. Ann came to UCE in 1985, and she told the story of hearing the minister's sermon at the time, Roger Fritz. It was titled, God and the Devil, Are They the Same? And Ann was hooked. She joined the singles group and met Rich not long after she came to this community. They were married, and she was woven into the fabric of the Combs family. She cared for Rich faithfully and tenderly until his death 2 years ago. Ann was one of those people that you might overlook because she never drew attention or recognition to herself. Once you took notice, however, you'd notice she was everywhere, doing good, leading from behind, being the connective tissue of our community in countless unassuming ways. I remember chatting with her at some church function and learning about some of the many ways that she was providing care in our congregation through regular lunches and get-togethers with friends and phone calls and cards. We talk here about weaving the fabric of community tighter to hold and support one another. That was Ann. She was a loving and thoughtful person. About a month before she died, the staff at church dedicated our weekly volunteer appreciation article to her. We call it Hats Off. We named Ann as a dedicated, loyal, and caring leader who has forged connections and caring relationships over many years, an integral part of lunch groups, book groups, and providing support to members and friends without fanfare or accolades. Brenda Russell read that article to Ann before she died, and it brought a smile to her face. I hope that she knew, and I believe she did, that she was seen, appreciated, and loved. The nurses and caregivers at McGaugh Care Center, where Ann was at the end of her life, said that she was the most popular person there. She had so many visitors because so many people loved her, and we know that she will be dearly missed. It's hard that we can't be together to celebrate her life here in this place. Gatherings such as we would have had at the church were the very thing that Ann relished most. A chance to sit and talk, to laugh and tell funny stories, to listen and be a supportive friend. The world is brighter, more creative and kind because Ann was a part of it. We'll now hear some reflections from some of those who knew Ann well. Her cousin Betty, her friend Amy, Cheryl and Maureen, her stepdaughters, Jason, her grandson, and finally Martha Holman, from her friend from UCE.
Hello, I am Ann's cousin Betty Arnquist. Ann had ancestors who were strong people. I'll talk about our ancestors, and I'll share memories of Ann from her cousins. The story is that Anna Berg and Andrew Arnquist met on the boat coming over from Sweden in the year 1870. Moving from Sweden to the fertile soil of Illinois at the time was quite an ordeal. First there was a boat from Sweden to the east coast of the United States. Then there was another boat through the Great Lakes, through Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, and Lake Michigan to Chicago. Then there was a train from Chicago to the Gough area, close to Bishop Hill. Anna Berg and Andrew Arnquist were married in Bishop Hill. Andrew Arnquist started working in a general store, and later he owned a general store. Anna Berg Arnquist gave birth 5 times, including our grandfather Bennett Arnquist. Bennett married our grandmother Carrie Stoneberg Arnquist. Bennett and Carrie had 3 children: Ann's mother Catherine, our cousin Alberta's mother Emmeline, and my father Benjamin. Here are some memories from Ann's 4 female first cousins, including my sister Nancy Arnquist Buchero, my late sister Barbara Arnquist Sanderson, and my cousin Alberta Anderson. Alberta recalls how much Ann was cherished by her parents. She also recalls that Ann was always a good student, starting in elementary school through her college years at Knox College and Bradley University. And Alberta remembers how Ann loved good food and good conversation with her family and friends. My sisters, Nancy and Barbara, and I, at a young age, drove with our parents from Battle Creek, Michigan, to the Bishop Hill and Galva area to visit Ann and her parents, and also my dad's sister Emmeline and her husband Walter. At the time, Ann and her parents lived in a farmhouse on a farm in Bishop Hill. Nancy recalls Ann's mother cooking large meals served on their large dining room table for our family visits. Brings to mind the lovely family meals in Ann's future. Nancy had a special memory of spending the night at Ann's house. Long after Ann's parents were asleep, Ann and Nancy were still up talking late into the night. Ann was always easy to talk with. She was a fine conversationalist even at a young age. Nancy recalls Ann being easy to talk with as an adult as well. Here's what Nancy said about Ann. Ann and I could always talk. There was no hesitation. We just talked and talked. Even though we may not have seen each other for a long time, we could talk as though we had just seen each other yesterday. Ann was an active listener. She listened and responded to what I said. Ann was not judgmental. She had a great personality. She was also very bright. In December of 1996, I drove with my parents to Galva for Ann's mother's 90th birthday party. We parked in the driveway, and my mother slipped and fell as she got out of the car. Rich ran from the house to see how my mother was. Luckily, it turned out that she had just slid right across the snow and was okay. My mom, Dad, and I were impressed with how quickly Rich came to my mom's aid. At the party, my dad got to see his cousin Raleigh Olson. That weekend was the last time that Ann's mother and my dad saw each other. They both died in the year 2000. Ann traveled to Battle Creek for our dad's funeral in 2000 and for our mom's 90th birthday in 2006 and our mom's funeral in 2007. Nancy, Barbara, and I were all grateful and touched that Ann drove to Battle Creek for these 3 family events. In 2008, Alberta and her husband Jim traveled to Chicago for a conference. Barbara and her husband Dick and I came to Chicago at the same time. We all met Ann at a fabulous restaurant that Ann selected. The 6 of us spent time together and enjoyed each other's company, as we always did. A fantastic and memorable trip occurred in September of 2013. A jolly group gathered in Bishop Hill for Old Settlers' Day, which celebrates the establishment of the Bishop Hill colony in 1846. Ann drove to Galva and Bishop Hill and met first cousins Barbara and me, and Barbara's husband Dick, as well as extended family cousins Jean Combites, Janet Bishop, Jeff Olson, and Bob Olson. A good time was had by all. One day, we walked around the historic section of Bishop Hill, which includes the old general store owned by Andrew Arnquist, an ancestor of all of the cousins. Some of us have different grandparents, but we are all descended from Anna Berg Arnquist and Andrew Arnquist. On another day, we drove to the campus of Knox College and saw the dormitory where Ann had lived as a student. We also saw the site of the Lincoln-Douglas debates for the 1858 Illinois senatorial campaign. We went through numerous photo albums and scrapbooks of our common ancestors. One night we had a group dinner where Ann sat at the end of the table with Barbara and Dick and had one of Ann's heartfelt conversations. Since that visit, my sister Barbara has also tragically died from cancer. Earlier, I mentioned that Ann had strong ancestors. Our grandmother was Carrie Stoneberg Arnquist. The Stoneberg family was among the first settlers of Bishop Hill who came from Sweden in 1846. At that time, there was no train from Chicago to the Galva-Bishop Hill area. Groups of settlers had a stagecoach or horse to carry supplies, and the old and the young, but most of the able-bodied men and women actually walked the 150 miles from Chicago to Bishop Hill. Now, I don't know if the parents of our grandmother, Carrie Stoneberg, walked from Chicago to Bishop Hill, but there's a good chance they did. Here's a story of our prior generation being strong, and when I heard of it, I thought, what? But it's true. Our extended family cousins, Jean, Janet, Jeff, and Don Pulaski, are descended from the first child born in Bishop Hill in 1846, who was born to a woman who walked from Chicago and then gave birth about 3 months later. Talk about tough. A woman took 2 boat trips coming from Sweden and then walked 150 miles from Chicago to Bishop Hill. Then she gave birth 3 months later to a girl who grew up and had a son, Henry Olson, who married Almeda Arnquist, the sister of our grandfather, Bennett Arnquist. Then for Old Settlers' Day in the year 2013, the descendants of Almeda and Henry Olson met the descendants of Bennett and Carrie Arnquist, and they wanted to meet the descendants of Blanche Arnquist Erickson and Joe Lester Erickson, but they were not available. All this 167 years after that baby was born. So tomorrow, when you're thinking, what shall we do today? How about a stroll from Chicago to Bishop Hill? I recall with such sweet sentiment all of my marathon telephone conversations with Ann. We talked about her activities at the Unitarian Church and at the Botanical Gardens. We talked about politics. We talked about Chicago's NPR show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and also talked about Rich's family. She talked of how she valued her friendship with Lois and her connection with Rich's children and the grandchildren. I recall her talking about her deep concern about Bill's cancer. There are multiple tragedies. One of them is if Ann were here now, she'd be doing anything she could to be supportive of Atoji and Mia and Darcy after Bill's tragic passing. That's the way Ann was. She was kind, she was loving, and she loved them so. Ann and I also talked about things that had happened in our parents' lives. We knew each other's parents from a young age. When either of us said something about our parents, we knew exactly what the other person meant. Here is my parents' painting of Lake Louise in the Canadian Rockies. Ann and I used to talk about how our parents drove together to the Canadian Rockies. Sound like the road trip to Montana? My parents drove from Michigan to Gough, then the four of them took a road trip. Lots of miles on the car. It was not see the USA in your Chevrolet. It was see Canada in your Buick. I miss talking with Ann. What a pleasure it was to have a friend who was also my cousin. All of Ann's cousins are so sorry that she has passed. Let's raise our mugs and toast to Ann's life. Here's to Ann. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Peisker. Sometime in the mid-1990s, my boss at the National Safety Council walked into my office to let me know she had hired the new customer service director. As she left, she turned and said, "The two of you will be good friends, beyond the council." Well, that new director was Ann, and our boss was absolutely right. We became fast friends, a friendship lasting these many years. In fact, Ann's first day at work, we had lunch, and the dialogue never stopped from that day forward. Through our work years, our departments often interface, and we had many things to talk about, and of course no time. So the end of work days often resulted in one of us making her way to the other's office to solve the problems and strategize for the future challenges. Invariably, the conversation would turn to other important matters such as books we were reading, growing up, all the stuff our mothers had and didn't throw away, religion, recipes, politics, etc., etc. You name it, we talked about it. Often, we would continue the conversation over dinner and a drink. These were really special moments for me, for no matter how badly the day went, I came to understand there was a place of respite with Ann, a place where a friend listened, providing a shared view or an entirely new perspective for me to consider, a place where she quietly shared knowledge that was broad in scope and deep in understanding. These moments always punctuated with laughter, lots of laughter. At the National Safety Council, as with all organizations, we sat through endless meetings lasting for hours and listened, not saying a word. And when we were ready to scream because of the craziness, Ann would speak up and in a couple of sentences make the most logical statements with all of us shaking our heads in agreement. Ann was also the one who raised the essential questions whose answers often provided the solutions we sought. As a result, others came to Ann for her insight. Her reputation as an impactful and fair manager was held by all. Now, when Ann and I found ourselves faced with retirement, it was wonderful to have a friend who wanted to embrace it and share with me her experiences as well as listening to mine. How did we do this? Of course, by doing something fun and completing the day's adventure with food and drink. Once a month, we met and shared the joys found in the retirement process, but most importantly, we talked and laughed about our changing lives and being happy with it all. I think of Ann every day. I think of her grace, gentle wisdom, and I miss her dearly. I think how she was there for me during my mother's illness and after, how she let me talk about whatever I need to say during low and high moments. I think about her joyful presence at birthday celebrations, a visit to see my puppy, and our annual architectural cruise. I shall keep close all these wonderful memories of Ann, as well as what she taught me. And I know my friend will continue guiding me through the adventure we know as life. Thank you.
I have to start by admitting I was somewhat resistant about meeting Ann for the first time. I was a college student with a bit of an attitude, a late bloomer of sorts. I consider myself to be an adult, but I did not want another mom, much less a stepmom. I recall thinking, what does she expect from me? Well, that attitude changed very quickly. Ann expected nothing but gave so much to everyone she met. Ann was always kind, thoughtful, and the most amazing listener. She made me feel valued and comfortable, no matter what the topic or the situation was. Ann was a fantastic conversationalist. I so enjoyed our chats about everything and anything under the sun. Some of Ann's favorite topics were gardening, cooking, religion, fashion, history, books, wine, and of course, Galva. We also discussed the difficult topics like politics, race, and human rights. I know that Ann had very high hopes for humanity, and she worked tirelessly to understand and to promote equal rights and peace for all. I am forever grateful and fortunate to have had the chance to know Ann. Ann made a huge impression on my heart. And though I miss her dearly, her amazing smile and her beautiful laughter is always with me. Rest in peace.
Hi, I'm Maureen Balluff. I'm Ann Peterson's stepdaughter. I remember when I first met Ann, it was at my father's townhome. It was about a year after he divorced my mother. I was 24 years old. And she was so pleasant and so engaging, and I was really happy for my father, and I was just happy for me and my family, as I knew that she was going to be his significant other. And I left the room after our introduction to go to the bathroom, and I overheard her say to my father, "Boy, you must have your hand full with her." And part of it made me laugh because she was right, and I was like, yeah, she could totally tell. And what's amusing to me now about it is that that's the only thing that she ever said that I disagreed with, that I didn't like that she said. She was one of the most kind, pleasant, caring, respectful people that I've ever known. And we had some nice trips together, little trips together. She took me on a architectural boat tour down in the Chicago River. And of course she knew the guy that was running the tour because she was involved in so many different groups that were interesting. And it was the most lovely day, one of my favorite days of all time. And we had a nice lunch on the river walk afterwards. And it was just kind of like her, just easygoing and effortless, kind of like my relationship with her is what I mean. And another day that we had that was really wonderful together is when we spent the day at the Botanic Gardens. And of course, since she volunteered there, was a lover of plants and trees and flowers, it was an extra bonus that she knew all the details about them and was able to share that with me, and that was really lovely. And mostly what I remember with Ann is her attention to details and her caring, respectful, nice, easygoing nature, and how if you had a conversation with her, it didn't matter if you were a close friend or somebody she just met, she paid so much attention to you and really knew how to engage people in conversations and how to really listen and was very interested in always and learning about people. We had great times. Always for the holidays, we would have Christmas dinner at my dad and Ann's house, and she would cook up a huge meal with something for everybody's liking, whether it be fish or meat, or, if you're vegetarian, she'd make a lot of vegetables and just something for everybody. Again, the attention to detail. And besides the enormous dinner, she would make the table set so beautifully that it would put Martha Stewart to shame. It was just gorgeous and time consuming, but she delighted in that. And another thing that stood out about that was that my mother would always be included. She and my mother were friends, and to me that speaks volume. And I will miss her laughter. And I was very blessed to have her as my stepmother.
Ann Peterson was a wonderful person and my grandmother. One of my fondest, earliest memories of her is her teaching me in kindergarten a few compound and larger words. More recent memories are of our lunches and dinners where she would always lend an ear and be kindly available there for any advice. She was a woman that saw all the sights she wanted to see. She loved the arts and nature. I found myself in her hometown of Bishop Hill shortly after her passing to come and visit and honor her. I saw a stone that was inscribed with a little something that feels contextually appropriate now. When someone you love becomes a memory, that memory becomes a treasure. I loved Ann.
Hi, my name is Martha Holman, and I'm a longtime member of this church, the Unitarian Church of Evanston, also known as UCE. Ann is much longer member than I. She was here for 35 years. I've been asked to talk about how the role of the church played in Ann's life and the role Ann played in the life of the church, both very important to one another. Ann and I first got to know each other throughout our UCE neighborhood group, a quarterly potluck held at different people's homes. She and Rich would show up, and Wayne and I would show up, each bearing our food offerings to share with all the others who came and brought food. Many of you who are here today are Northwest neighborhood friends. Everyone knew Ann and Rich, and there were many friendships and card groups and get-togethers. As I got to know Ann better, I discovered that she was what I call a gentle puller, which means she engaged one in conversation, finding out more about you until she knew what she could get you to help with at the church. She pulled you into activities that really fit you. And Ann knew this congregation so well. She was involved in many recurring events and important work of the church for years. Annual fundraisers like the Fall Serendipity Auction and the Spring Rummage Sale were a real focus for Ann. She had her place in each of those and was reliably involved year after year. Ann got me involved in helping a bit with the setup for the auction. I was there a few times, but Ann was there for days and days helping to get the entire silent auction all set up. The back office process, the tagging and display of donations, the recording of bidding winners, and more. Ann was critical to the running of the silent auction. The annual all-church rummage sale was also very important to Ann. She really understood that it served multiple purposes: recycling goods rather than throwing away, sharing bounty at a very low price with our neighbors, and building community with each other and with our guests who came to shop. I was working in the clothing department of the rummage sale when one year Ann pulled me into switching departments at the sale, joining her housewares department early on. I stayed with her for the rest of my time at the rummage sale so far. Ann was the chair and the mastermind behind how successful the housewares area was each year. She had charts showing where every table should be put, where products went, and how to price them. But she wasn't rigid about this. She was open to new ideas and often said yes to other suggestions. She could get me or anyone, I think, to help out with one more thing without ever raising her voice. She just quietly encouraged and pulled you in with her charm into more volunteering. And Ann really cared about the financial success of these ventures. That concern for her church community led to a big adventure for me. At one of the auctions, about 10 years ago or so, Ann noticed that one of the vacation homes wasn't pulling in the kind of bids it should have gotten. And so she took me and Jenny Neiman aside and asked us if we would be willing to bid on that with her and end up going on a vacation with her if we won it, just so she could bid it up and get a higher price for that vacation home. So saying yes to Ann was a habit, and we both said yes. And when we won the vacation home in Montana, the planning began for a 2-week-long road trip through the Badlands of South Dakota, smack dab in the middle of and landed us smack dab in the middle of the Harley-Davidson annual summer gathering near Rapid City. When we sat down to breakfast at the motel one morning, we found ourselves near some tattooed, red bandana-wearing, leather-vested folks at the next table. They looked a little on the rough side, and I was a little hesitant to engage. But Ann struck up a cheery conversation with them right away, getting to know them and finding out that they were kind of the ministry arm of the Harley gang. They were the people who ride along with the group to make sure there's always someone to talk to in a moment of need, to say a prayer with, or to help solve a problem. Chaplains on motorcycles. After that adventure, we drove on into the vast beauty of Montana open skies. It was a time of new scenes, harrowing mountain roads, funny and friendly encounters with strangers along the way, and a growing friendship among the three of us. An area of church work that interested Ann was membership. She belonged to and at times chaired the membership team and helped to welcome new members and find ways to further engage people who had been coming for a while. She was on the leadership development team and, of course, on a hospitality team for Sunday mornings. Another important role Ann played was as a member and then chair of the nominating committee for several years. This is the group that tunes into the membership of the church in order to identify and match up skills, passion, and open positions in leadership. About 4 or 5 years ago, this congregation's leaders decided there was a need for some changes to the property that would require raising some significant funds. Ann stepped up to help with the research in the beginning part of it, working on strategy planning, surveying the membership for needs and wants, working with others to get preliminary cost estimates, and ultimately became the chairperson of the feasibility phase of the project. When that study showed we had a good case to launch a capital campaign to raise funds for building and property improvements, Ann could have sat back and passed the baton, knowing that her work had been successfully done. But did she do that? No. Instead, she agreed to join the fundraising group to monitor and move the projects forward during that phase. Ann saw the campaign end last October and overshoot the goal. She was a contributor to that success in so many ways, even as she herself was getting sick. Ann and I intersected in many ways, almost all through connection at this church, which has many blessings, not the least of which is the possibility of deep friendship. Many UCE folks enjoyed a dear and deep friendship with Ann. She was a generous person who gave of her time and talents and treasure and shared her wisdom with UCE and her friends. We treasured Ann. I treasured Ann. I get to keep the memories of her asking me to join her on another adventure, time after time. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your heartfelt memories of Ann. I'm imagining all of you at home with your stories and your memories and your thoughts right now, your experiences with Ann. Together we create a tapestry of her life, of the spirit of her life. Members of the UCE choir, as directed by Vickie, Hellyer, our director of music, have joined in this virtual choir piece, singing one of our most cherished Unitarian Universalist hymns, Spirit of Life. Please join in singing from home if you are so moved. And now to our hearts remembering, we commend her spirit. There we shall hold in sacred recall our memory of Ann. If there be any words unsaid or any forgiveness withheld, may we find a way back to peace with her, though she is no longer physically with us. As we hold our thoughts of Ann in our minds and her memory in our hearts, let's take a moment to send our blessings to her in silence. We give thanks for the life of Ann, who took her place among us and whose life is now fulfilled. The truth of her life endures, for it is woven into the fabric of the larger life of which we and Ann are all a part. Mindful of our own mortality and of the value of life, may we here and now resolve to live a little more closely to our values, to care a little more deeply for others, to risk a little more often. And on this day, may we tell someone very clearly that they are valued and they are loved. This is what we can do to honor her. May our lives and the lives of all beings be whole. Spirit of life, source of love, God of many names and mystery beyond all naming, we are grateful to share this time of remembering and celebrating Ann. She touched the lives of many in endless ways, and her impact will remain. May we hold one another in our grief so that we may continue to love boldly even as we reckon with loss. May we all continue to experience life with joy and reverence, For that is how we honor her most faithfully. Let our faith in the power of love remain. May we continue to live with courage and wonder, and may we be a blessing to each other and to all the lives that we touch. Amen. As we extinguish the chalice flame, we carry our memory of Anne in our hearts. Will you say responsibly the words, "We remember her," to this adaptation by Roland B. Gittleson of A Jewish Prayer? In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember her. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we remember her. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember her. So long as we live, she too shall live, for she is now a part of us as we remember her. Please enjoy the postlude and then the slideshow of photos again. You are invited to join in a Zoom reception immediately following. The link to that Zoom room is in the Show More section below. The family also requests any donations made in Anne's memory be given to the UCE Endowment Fund. You can send in a check made out to UCE with endowment in the memo line, or go to our website and click the donate button. Thank you for being with us today in honor and in loving memory of Ann Peterson. Go in peace.